Ja, das kann zeigen, die sagen.
Tata Jakab Sosona Yopatani, to dog and doing about Samaratani, so gave it a shitty so little idol of Kangshi Bojap, Malariba can't hold our child.
Dharma friends in Sangha from around the world, good morning. Here in Arizona, we had a lot of snow today. Now today is just like a Milarepa's retreat center. Are you doing opening prayers or?
That Drikung Garchen Institute, Tata Jamik Togati, the Nanore, the Leandri Tapuche song, Tapuche, here at Amambo Yore, the Lodges of the Watchapon, the Lodona by Jakatan, the Lodges of the Tapconari, Lodge Kavan Chavambata legendary song. Richu Lambda Doajiva de la Kang, the Sons of the Tunjuk. The Dandy little GP Lord Dogore, she landed the doors on such of the Tunjore. The lamp trapasival at that on Dawgediba, to Dawgediba in Dogo Yore, the little the Trapata, good double Trapata, to Dawgetiba, Niore, let us have a tub, let on the payment Lambda Manda Yore, the limit of the Dana, she was something to Rumbuke, the Children Jeva, Magakonga, Yapshite, Depton Mambo Priore, the Lamana was also Sunguyore, the terrain, Naranji, Yetagon, Talk, the other country should not hold in the Nipa, the daughter the Children about the sugar, Mendaja to the sugar, the Maripa, nothing young, Lama gave it in the Bedunata, Klima was Yogore, the Jetabella Kadisha. Oh, Magigi did all up at the Terre, the Rio, they told him, nothing around the checkers or so now. They don't get it. The tickets at only. They don't use the top down your marry. They don't get some book. Shaky Umado. Rang you kind of down your marry. Triteria, theatre, none, the Gigi Pinsula, drawn on for it.
So today we have a teaching that was organized by mainly Garchen Rinpoche and the German Center. And so generally when we speak the Dharma, we speak about those 4 Dharmas, Gampopa, there's actually so much to be said about that. But for example, just in brief, the first one, grant your blessings that my mind turns toward the Dharma. And that actually is the 4 thoughts that turn the mind. This is really only talking about that. It is really about the understanding that we have found the precious human body, that is difficult to find, that this life is impermanent, and then karma, cause and effect. And then secondly, grant your blessings so that my Dharma may progress along the path. And that is related to the Bodhicharya Vatara, where we give up our self-grasping and we cultivate an altruistic mind. And then grant your blessings that confusion on the path be cleared away. And so ultimately we have to get to the ultimate truth. But there's like a worldly or a relative confusion that need to be cleared away. and then there's like an ultimate confusion. And there are many different steps on the path, many different practices and methods to clear away confusion. For example, Khenpo Samdrop Rinpoche had composed commentary on those 4 Dharmas too, and had made little books out of that, and also distributed them. And also many other lamas teach on that topic. So I myself, I'm not going to refer to a text today because I don't see so well with my eyes. I will just speak from what I have in my mind, not referring to a text. And this teaching will be like a mandala offering to you, Dharma friends. So if there are any things in those teachings that you find are not correct, you wonder about it, and you should ask your other lamas. There's many lamas also joining here. You should ask them, or just listen. And if you feel that don't notice this old man said this, is that okay? You can ask your lama that. And then if it's not okay, then I ask for your forgiveness, and directly you should ask for clarification from your lama. But I do not have a lot of learning, studying myself. What I'm sharing with you is really just with a good intention, but not anything that comes from a lot of learning. So this is how I'm going to give those teachings, and please also ask questions to your other teachers. So generally speaking, as I mentioned before, there's much to be said in terms of the scriptures when relating these teachings to the scriptural authorities. But So for one, I don't have so much learning, and also we don't have a lot of time. So I will just explain this really from the perspective of my own understanding. And so that really goes back to the essence. We need to really understand what's the essence of these teachings. So first, Grand Blessing said the mind turns toward the Dharma. So what really is the Dharma? The Dharma, the purpose of the Dharma is to transform our mind, to purify our mind. And who taught us how to do that? The Buddha said in the very beginning, completely tame your own mind. This is the Buddha's teachings. So taming your own mind means to purify the mind. That's the Buddha's teaching. Milarepa also had said that ordinary sentient beings, they have very good habits when it comes to cleaning their bodies, but they don't really know how to clean their minds. And that's what we have to do. We have to clean our mind, purify our mind. And that is why we need the Dharma. And so to do that, the Buddha taught 84,000 different Dharma teachings. And so then, if we have to purify our mind, what is it that makes the mind be impure? What is it that we have to purify? It is self-grasping. It is this grasping at a self that does not actually exist. And this is really where all confusion begins. So then when you really examine that, when you look into that, whether or not this self exists, what is it that you call a self? So you call someone a person because of their body. So you call, you label this body the person. But when that body dies, then you only have a corpse. So then the person is not the body, but the person is the mind. The body is also just created by that mind. And it's not just the body or the mind of a human being as a person, but we're speaking here, when we say person, we speak about all sentient beings in the 6 or the 3 realms of samsara. They are all created by the mind. And so then, since we have a mind, and since we have a body, so what do we want to achieve? Do we want to experience happiness, or do we want to suffer? So everyone who has a mind, even the slightest, the smallest little creature, little life form, wants to be happy and does not want to suffer. That we all share in common. So if you want to experience happiness, the cause of happiness is within the mind. And if you want to free yourself from suffering, the cause of suffering is also in the mind. And so therefore the Buddha had taught that temporarily, when you still perceive a self, if you want to experience happiness, you have to create the causes of happiness. So to understand that, you have to reflect what is happiness, and what is the quality of happiness, what is suffering, and what is the fault of suffering. You have to think about this well. So in brief, the Buddha taught, completely tame your own mind. That means purify your own mind. And when you reflect on these words, then you really begin to think well about whether or not the Dharma really is necessary. Then you will realize that.
Jumdili Chibi Miti, da Saturtam Matota, Yichibo, Kantajang, Saturtam Chutodona, and save the Chutodo Marisi, Kamiti Jumdili Chimina. Rita da dele change this somebody, Matapan Gorgon and a song or race. Lay them delang, shitches on a chisa meet the Katayan the bordas. Drop some medium now cast on Bala, Carlotte, the Gamadoka. Somewhere. Delatine, Rita, lay them dearly chitted. The Lord should have top corner. The very chicken. Should not have the doctor race.
So I have to take myself as an example too. When I was very young, I was thinking about how is it that the mind turns toward the Dharma. And so when I was very young, I didn't think so much about it still, but then I came across some instructions. For example, Chikden Sumgön had said in the Gongchik that about karma, he said that cause and effect is the natural manifestation of the moment-to-moment thoughts. And that really sums it up. It is really just that. And also at that time, my Guru Chime Dorje, I asked him about that, and he also gave many explanations. And it's really just about that. And Milarepa also had said that. And so then I kind of put all of these together, and I found that this is what it is. It all comes down to the mind. The seed of karma, the seed is within the mind. So that's when I first began to think, when I was young, that it's very important to to purify the mind. And the root of purifying the mind is trust in karma, cause and effect. So the entering the Dharma or not entering the Dharma really has to do with trusting karma. And so therefore it's the mind that has to enter the Dharma. It's not just the outer appearance. So a person who doesn't really trust in karma, even though maybe their outer appearance may be in accordance with the Dharma, but if they don't really trust in karma, then their mind has not turned toward the Dharma. Also in a song by Jigten Sumgön on impermanence, and then he's also going on speaking about karma, cause and effect. He says that if one hasn't gained complete certainty in the workings of karma, cause and effect, then any kind of exposition of the Dharma is like a mere lip service. So it's just like of throwing an arrow into empty space. So it is pointless. So the point is what's important is to really gain a certainty in the workings of karma, cause and effect. And so that is really the only way, the only practice for the mind when the mind turns towards the Dharma. So the mind turning toward the Dharma really is related to trusting in karma. When you trust in karma, then you will accomplish the Dharma. The mind turns toward the Dharma.
Mama jebse tate lulatus. Oh, tata chuko chewa dedo jikti kamdra kare yongnaya. Chuktiwa mama ke les zo chawari del jukushi ratona yomares. Samma kache tate lelatus. Tata che mama de lulatus. Tata de lelatus. Lek shokasaka do semkasaka yoris. Sangsa. Deretini 다 미상부지 책대리 리락 탑직 사인바 마드 미상부의 지지 네 일단 상부 주변나 들이 다탐지 밖에 소고요리 상부 주바지 가리 이는 맞지바지 랑라 페바다 이는 대가리 맞지바 남대리 택슈리 대 마시 다다 가리 제가도 로주도 로고 동무지 가리 딴 잡을나 등인 잡다위 요거 요래시 뭐 탑이 다지 그서 무슨 파파가 땅한테 람상직 동네도 잡아서는 다들 죽이 배는 동시 다들 죽이 어때를 강피만 동시 대라고 제가 요래 대라고 출마해 얘나 죽이 대라들이 대라고 제가 탑대 요리 될 핀에 탑 이게 핀 탑을 내야 된다 핀 탑을 내기 요래 죽 제대로야 핀 탑대 가리 양 마마야 줄 셈나 주요 레짐데 시네 사랑이 빠져래 샤바체가 요래서 유바체가 요래서 스케 뭐도 답자체가 요래서 이 제네한테 고르셈지게 됐다 내 두고 요 말이 양들이 같이 연거리 양 답자체가 양이 양들 때다 사지 작자 답아 니족 탐지라 소종제 다를 있는 데 소종 탱지래요 종간 남강아 대탑제대 대탑제 신체 대탑 기와니 기와 체랍을 동하게 내 종나 대탑제 샤트가 탑 랑 육바체 정말 대탑 사지 좀지가 선말에 득바를 용지 메자 득바를 샤고 탑서 로치스 송 대탑에 탑대 생거요래 대외나들이 다다 당나 파체가 때문에 로치스 뭐로와도 강래 체도 좋아지는 체지도 좋아지고요. 강제들 라리 소비면은 성격랑을 내면은 강에 서섬대와 짜티셔봐 예스 유답식은 기쁘치지 남양 먼저 타박고 방조 돈을 내가 자세라니 숨바 책대 삼의 셈을 다 취시받아 짜쳐 보인다. 깨와는 깨와 체랍니 체랍라 내가 펜바 타토 내가 피바 가리면 딱 빠른 도리석을 리탑탑 대출해야지 도리석을 리탑은 타톡 사지가 관방 탑탑 대출해야지 내가 펜바 타톡 내가 추가 책동대 추가 동사대 대지 책 대지 이가 요 말이지 펜대적은 내지 뭐대 사지에 때마지 봐대 사제 때만 생각나는 요거랬어. 내가 서산제 때만 낭산제 때만 상황산제 때만 썸미요리데 이런 내가 좋아를 다다다고서 대다고서 썸못하는 대다도 고통 거랬어.
In Tibet, especially the older people, they have like a habit of saying something which is like kind of like a natural Dharma teaching, but it's not like something that we would actually call a Dharma teaching. But so what they say is that, for example, when things go well and they're happy, then they say, when I'm happy, that's the kindness of the 3 jewels. And when I suffer, that's because of my own karma, the force of my own karma. And that is really what it comes down to, just these 2 lines, these 2 statements, yeah? So that is really what determines whether or not our mind becomes the Dharma. And so when things go wrong, it is my own karma. So that means that if you want to know, it is said that if you want to know what you did in a previous life, look at your present body. Everything that you experience in this life, living in this world, all the happiness and all the suffering, all is the result of the karma that you have accumulated in previous lives. It's already created. So often there's not much that we can do about it. And then it says, but if you want to know where you will go next, look at your present karma, your present actions. So the past we can know by looking at our present body. the future we can know by looking at our present actions. And that originates within our mind. That is why the older Tibetans also always say, you should be a good person. Be a good person, don't do bad things. Have an excellent conduct. Also, His Holiness Dalai Lama speaks about that. The excellent conduct that we need to cultivate is one of non-violence, not hurting others, and treating others the way we want to be treated ourselves. So if we don't understand that, then we don't know how to do that, then the mind will not turn toward the Dharma, and we experience a lot of suffering. And this is really where all the suffering we experience right now in this world really comes from. And so then the Dharma, however, is a method to become free from this suffering, but then we shouldn't misunderstand that, because if you tell that to an ordinary person, you say that, oh, if you practice the Dharma, then that will help with your suffering, and then that person might just take it and immediately practice the Dharma, thinking that it will immediately clear away their suffering. But then it doesn't go away, and then they think that the Dharma hasn't been of any benefit. So it's not like that. We shouldn't understand it like that. But then there is still a method. There is a method. But then when we apply the method, so there either it helps right away or it doesn't help right away, and that depends on also what we have done in our previous lives. So when you experience a difficulty and you practice the Dharma, and the Dharma becomes a method to overcome it, then that's also because in a previous life you have understood the Dharma and you have trusted in karma, and maybe also in a previous life, and this is what we always do also in this life, but let's say in a previous life you have done something wrong, but then also you recognize that and you regretted that, and you confessed, and you took a vow, a commitment, I will not do this again. But then since we are samsaric beings, we cannot always stay with our commitments, and then we make a mistake again, so we run into obstacles, and then again we promise we will not do it again, and then we do it again, and so on. But then we always regret in the between, and so as a result of that, because we have regretted and confessed, then now in this life the Dharma actually can be of clear away our suffering or be of greater benefit. And that's also why it is an important practice to confess. The followers of the Buddha Shakyamuni therefore have also established this tradition of practicing the Sojong, which is the purifying and restoring practice, which is often done twice a month at full and at new moon. During these times we confess and we purify all of our negativities. And so then the Buddha himself also had said that there is nothing good there's no good quality to negativity, to negative action, but if there would be anything good about it, then it would be their potential to be confessed and completely purified. And that happens. The method of confession and purification is to feel a sense of remorse and not again repeating the act. And so this is how the mind then turns toward the Dharma, when we seize this method. And so we have to see for ourselves whether or not our mind has really become one with Dharma, has turned towards the Dharma. And so the reason why most of our mind has not really become one with the Dharma is because we consider this life as most important, the happiness and the suffering of this life. There's one verse in the 37 Bodhisattva practices that I always have in my heart. I also encourage you to memorize it, to remember it. So it's that verse that says, the happiness of the higher realms and of samsaric existence is like a dewdrop on the tip of a blade of grass, vanishing in a single moment. Striving for the never-changing state of liberation is the Bodhisattva's practice. So that is a very precious teaching that I recommend you remember. If you understand that, you will bring about the temporary benefit and ultimate happiness. So what's the temporary benefit? That is to be born in the higher realms temporarily from lifetime to lifetimes until you attain enlightenment. So temporarily it is to take birth in the higher realms, which is like the temporary turning to the Dharma. And then ultimately you achieve the state of enlightenment, so the ultimate happiness. So actually, this is really what all Dharma comes down to, the meaning of Dharma. The reason it is necessary is because it brings temporary benefit and ultimate happiness, and it's nothing else at all. Also, it is said that the Buddha's teachings are the only source of benefit and happiness. And the Buddha's teachings are within the mind. They have to be within the mind. So we speak about there being an outer, inner, and a secret aspect to the Buddha's teachings. But this is how we should mainly understand it. This is really the essence of the Buddha's teachings, as we just have explained.
Le kansa pati sebudul bakcha jogo yore bakcha yaadri ti bakcha de tiwige kholo dawore kare parjana ti titule ti ko bakcha te le kansa pati na meyin ko yore pero ta dabelna ta dongin de ta yongna yang kashi dongin ka yo mal le na chamile se dongin me ba pamju kangin me ba de yore kashi de ta ta pa jodi yong ko yore rimbe 이들 차라 동네 차라 요는 잡을 상노 땅나야 직관 말이 대 라왕 요 말이 라왕 작합 탐지 라왕 요나야 동네 용그 바지 양 라왕 요 말이 라왕 배고는 연구 요래 오 다치다 라왕 만두스 대 하고서 다조 대 수강을 또 달래라 토서 레데 가레신 하고고도 오다출스틸 하고고도 그러니까 삼바 게당 먹이세 다래 그게 좀니지 좀 짐으로 대양 랑게 삼바가 뜨니 같이 파져서 주 상보를 요나요 삼바가 뜨니 삼바 상보이나 삼바 상을 사달라면 장시 삼바미나 사달라면 니제 담배대요래 대외는 삼바상이 제베테 가야 따뜻해 대독 용거요래 장보를 다 대화 용거래 니발라 동네 용거 티콜로 삼는 준비에 찾아서 삼는 다 소소랑 동네도 다 일레리만 나 레테 사파리스 나 아니라 테타버리 동네 강에 망고 용서 라글레리 삼는 마도 세트게 레리 디리도 왔다고 소리 어때 요 말이지 베테나 테 삼모타나 다 라글레 르마 이 성분하니 다지 세부 이제지 르마 이 요타베지는 이디 레게 도처테다 도도 하고나 테라카리 라리 소디메 술나니 somebody 다디 셔도 죽은 성동안에 듣고래지려 답했어. 딸애들이 많이 성숙제 등에 때려도 봐. 돌이 있으면 돌이 쓰는 동안 돌이 쓰는 등의 요리 이 따들로도 남자니 소장제 때 상모다나 그 송도도 창제 때도 송요리 요단 메타 딱지에서 딴 거요 말이 문이 다다 딱지에다는 대리 연구 너가 뭐다 다 너도 해서는 로니 바니 따지는 바니 그 요리 텔라티는 상모다나 그거는 추고함 뭐고 출연 요가 뭐 적들랑 그 담가리 도디 출연 적도 용 띠가리도 띠걸로 싸는 시작도 던 거래 마저 좀 가리도 따뜻한 답을 내도 소소소소로 때 레스트만 싸모다는 문제들이 잡는 레제 사파테 하고야 그래 이들은 싸모다니 다 출연 거래 다 출연 요구를 그래 다 똑들이 문이 시작지 삼지 출연 요구를 le jimde ha ko ne ta jimde le mi shi ta tri jo me ma ra ni kya da sa o ti ko sa ma ri ha ja ta che ta wa ni jimde ki ji sam ra so de ka re na so cha tham che ta ma tang sam lo tang o xie dang ga na do de pa ra da do zhe da so cha ji ren che a ji tham chi ra ji me ma tham che ge se da do da su ju me se ko zo mang bo nyang ro to yo ma re ra ji ge xie wa de wa ta ji so cha ja pra ma wo nyam de to ko re ni de so cha ka xie la han ning ji wo de li o nan lo ke ta me de li ya la de li chu wa pa ma da ji so cha ka ji to ma de se ko ka re se ko o ta ko so se ko do rang ti chu pa rang ti jo ti ko do jo ti do ti ni le ti ko so me o ta jim le thong do ti ni si ji na ti so la ti sa ba ge wa ta me ge wa ni che pa na si ji de ta je le ti la ti ni ti ta ra me ta sa lo jo rang ti Pipata deva dubli o jasambora te pipata deva dubli salone yangu yore rangang semna deva yore no pata tonge dubli tamcher te rangi ko to kang che yore te to to rangi jor thok do te 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 kang re te ti dupa te la kang ta to sem re sa ji sender songdi te yu wa te deva te sa ji ka re te la lo chu so do te 너는 세트 상마 좀 맞어. 딱 맞으려 용띠 가래도. 딱 맞으려 좀 가래도. 띠띠 딱 때 다를 못 맞지. 오, 딱 되게 세분은 요래. 난 너무 막 예시네. 되니 제용 그 대래들이 로치로디 따도 가도고도 딱 레좀 되리시지. 레좀 되리지라. 이다 레좀 되리시지. 뭐가니 저가리 오. 산지 지스 조가 탐치게 가르된 초가 세계로 나랑게 답도 세계로 십지 탐치 대와 당 대외 저타 대버치제 수비 이감이랑게 은이 싸로 따고요 이게 나타는 너무 고사래지 대와다 대외 저타 대버치제 저 가르를 주지라 그 하고 돌보지 대외 저 대와 저지 말에 대외 저찍 봐도 봐도 감슴 생치를 내가 저쪽 받아 요 말이지. 그걸 삼지리지. 랑나 핀바데 때 마다 보여 봐네. 삼지리 내가 저 삼지리지. 등에 그 저다 잡았지. 다 다르지. 나도 좀 열지라. 삼지 열이 이 탐지를 들다. 나그 체드 일단 유모 봐. 적대 나그 체드 째도. 이거 가는 체도 되나. 오, 다 등에게 정리 단지리스. 하고 요리. 때나 다 때나 되니 난 단지 요지다. 다 파체 사체가 개와다. 다나게 로치서 줘요. 그냥이 제기요. 사. 그때 양이 절다 양이 좋아다 담보. 양이 가야게 줘고. 다 가라니 들이서 제대로 되어 토마토 서마 타와 토마 제대. 저거 요사 딜로디 끼리 디드는 저거요. 디드는 저거요라. 다들 출로 주서 성나 출람도 저거래지. 출상은 다 차고래지. 로추도 저거데 로추도 저다야. 다다다 추도 저거데 레드 데시바네. 저 대와고나. 다디 루마 삼치를 탐치 저 대베 저 토고요래지. 매들 소남 체버리 소남 가리리 소남 체버리 인피가 샘게 등이 르가게 가스강 체버리 딱 데비저레스 데르티레 가시가 초랑 맞춰봐 가시 람이가 잡고요 septi를 피바다 대와 두고 요래 내가 소남 요래데 소남들이 공리 챔지다 이 조경화가 제 맞춰 소남들 양 돌아오고 잠자는 게다지고 저기라서 보거든요. 걔는 로추를 주고 가다가 담보 잡수 줘. 사진이 용되지. 바로 샘지 탐지 동네에서 샘지 차적을 잡는 당면 이제 다들 뭐지? 뭐가니 Three swing up with general, the Asama Bornoya, they are two lambda door tap, the Tatani Tambo, watches and water, Lord chooses song young, two tail lambda door over race, or Tatani goes home your head.
So these are those two lines that are extremely important, and that I ask you today to really bear those two words in those two lines in mind, those two sentences, which is again, if you want to know what you did in the past, look at your present body. If you wish to know where you will go next, look at your present actions. The actions, the karma, is anything that we have done with body, speech, and mind. And whatever has been done has placed an imprint, a karmic imprint, into the mind. It's just like you're taking a picture or making a film, and then it's kind of stored as this film roll, and it will become projected. So karma will eventually ripen. And this is also why we witness such suffering in this world right now. Karma is ripening. And even though a lot of people suffer, there are still some who do not suffer at all. There are some who are not sick. There are some who are not unhappy in their minds, who are happy. There is many who do not experience financial difficulties and so on. And then there is others who always experience difficulties. So think in this way about karma and the very subtle manifestations of karma too. By looking at the suffering or the happiness that people experience right now in this world. And now, whatever difficulty people experience, they don't really have much control over it, or kind of a freedom over it. Even though we might live in a free or independent country, still we have to experience suffering. We don't have so much freedom over that. So understand that actually, when you look at that, we don't really have much freedom then. We run into suffering anyways. And why is that? It's because of karma, cause and effect. And that is why, when you think in this way, you recognize that you need the dharma, because then we understand the workings of karma, cause and effect. And that karma comes down to the mind, the either virtuous or non-virtuous state of the mind. So it is said that when it comes to virtue and non-virtue, do not follow the outer reflection of virtue and non-virtue, but virtue and non-virtue is the state of your mind. So it might seem that your external, your outer conduct might be excellent, but what's really makes your mind or your karma become positive is your state of mind. It is said that if the mind is positive, if the intention is positive, then the path, like the bhumis and the paths, your path will become positive. And if your intention is negative, then your path forward will become negative. So it is the thought, the state of mind, that determines your happiness and your suffering. If your mind is positive, you will experience happiness. If your mind is negative, you will experience suffering. So think about karma along those lines. When you experience suffering, then therefore recognize, I have created that myself. It's not anybody else. Or when you see other people suffer, then recognize, I also have accumulated such karma. I also have experienced so much trouble, so much difficulty. It's all karma, and no one else is doing it to us. So there's no point in saying that, it's because of this, it's because of that. We can't really blame anyone but ourselves. It's our own karma. Anything that we have done with our own body, speech, and mind, and mainly the mind as the basis, and body and speech are like the servants of the mind. So this is how karma is created. And then also in the 37 Bodhisattva practices, it says, the negative action is the Buddha had taught that wrong action or evil is the root of the lower realms, all the unbearable suffering of the lower realms, and therefore do not practice wrong even at the cost of your life. So all of the unbearable suffering in the 3 lower realms is the result of our own karma, our negative action. And then also in the 3 higher realms, in the human world, for example, we experience a lot of suffering too, and that's also our karma. So this is related to the teachings on the 4 thoughts that turn the mind. So when we think about that, you have to really think about, now, is it therefore necessary or not for me to practice the Buddha Dharma? And if you really think about it, you can really find some certainty and find that it is really necessary. You really see whether or not you need the Dharma and why you need the Dharma. And then, of course, whether or not you enter the Dharma is your own choice. But it is important to think about the qualities of entering the Dharma and the faults of not entering the Dharma. And you figure this out by thinking about karma and what leads to happiness and what leads to suffering and so on. And also by looking at the suffering right now in this world. So then you will gain some certainty as to whether or not it is necessary to enter the Dharma. So those who possess intelligence, they will then enter the Dharma. And they will enter the Dharma on the basis of having certainty in karma, understanding karma. And so this is also how I myself have approached it. It's not that I just kind of took it in without thinking about it, but I also entered the Dharma really thinking about it a whole lot. I was really thinking about, for example, this verse, this quote by Jigden Sumgön, cause and effect is the natural manifestation of the moment-to-moment thoughts. I was really thinking about it. What does this really mean? And to understand that, I thought about the various different animals or human beings, all the different life forms. And for example, looking at animals, I recognized, for example, that like a scorpion or a poisonous snake, that is really a manifestation. They're really a manifestation of hatred. And they just naturally, as a manifestation of that, wherever they go, they can't help it but cause harm to others. And then when we see them, then even though we don't naturally want to kill them, often we have no choice but to kill them. And then we cut them and we kill them. And then there's other animals that are very peaceful and that can coexist together with many others and are very gentle, and we invite them in and we feed them. It's almost like we're making offerings to them. And then there is other animals that just upon seeing them, we have to kill them. And so actually what's really happening is that they really are in a way killing themselves, because it all happens through the force of karma. They have created a cause and now they are experiencing the result ripening. So thinking in this way, I recognize that, it all comes down to, this is what karma comes down to. Karma comes down to the positive or the negative state of mind, the virtuous or the non-virtuous state of mind. And that makes all the difference. So that is the cause. What we call the cause is within the mind. And then once the cause is present, various conditions arise on the external level. And benefit or harm then is created on the external level. So even though it seems that happens on the external level, it really comes from within the mind. But then, so when a certain cause is created, then on an external level, one experiences suffering or benefit. And on an internal level, one also experiences either suffering or happiness. So if you think in this way, you gain certainty in the cause. It all comes down to the cause. The cause is the mind. So that's what the Buddha meant when he said, completely tame your own mind. Tame your afflictive emotions. So this is the word of the Buddha. And this is how your mind turns towards the Dharma. So in brief, for the mind to turn toward the Dharma, you have to think about the qualities of entering the Dharma and the faults of not practicing the Dharma. There's no need to think so far away and about so many different things. Just come back to the root. It's all within the mind, your own mind. It's all one's own afflictive emotions. So when the mind progresses, so once the mind turns toward the Dharma, the mind then progresses along the Dharma path. And so where does it have to go? How does it go there? How does the mind go toward the Dharma? It is through trusting in karma. Trusting in karma means to understand the causes. And so all of the followers of the Buddha, whatever we practice, whether we practice a sadhana or prayer and so on, we always read those opening prayers of refuge and bodhicitta. In the beginning, we always say, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. So this is also one thing I really thought about very carefully, and therefore I thought that that is why others should really recite this prayer too. And if you, sometimes people ask, a question about that in terms of what is, in terms of the cause, what is the cause of happiness? And so often they don't really understand that, and because their mind is very elaborate, and they say that, oh, Rinpoche, is this a cause of happiness, or is that, what is it? Is this good or bad, and so on? It's not any of that. It all comes down to one thing. There's just one thing. There's only one cause of happiness. It's not, you don't have to think in a very complicated way. Is it this or is it that? Is this good or is this not good? It's only one thing for all sentient beings in the three realms of samsara, and that is love. Love is the cause of your own benefit and the happiness of others. And you identify love, for example, by looking at the love between a mother and her child. That is the cause of happiness. And then we say, may beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So what is wrong or negative? Again, it's not a lot. It's just one thing, and that is the self. To consider the self is most important at the cost of others. And from that self, this self-importance, then the other 6 afflictive emotions arise. And that is the only and the actual cause of suffering. So it's self-grasping. So this is how the mind turns toward the Dharma. And so people often think that my mind has turned toward the Dharma because I'm a Dharma practitioner. But then if I follow up on that question and say that's okay, so why do you practice the Dharma at all in the first place? Why do you practice the Dharma? Then they might say that I am practicing the Dharma in order to experience happiness in this life and in order to become liberated in the future, in future lives. That's why I practice the Dharma. So then they think that their mind really has become one with the Dharma and that they are followers of the Dharma. So the mind may have turned toward the Dharma, but then the Dharma also has to become the path, which is the second point. And for the Dharma to become the path, you have to cultivate an altruistic mind. And that is really what purifies the mind. So, as we said before, the Buddha said, completely tame your own mind. This is the Buddha's teachings. So first, you must enter the Dharma, and you enter the Dharma, or you turn toward the Dharma through understanding karma. But then secondly, that Dharma also has to become the path. So on the basis of understanding karma, you have to cultivate an altruistic mind, and then this is how the Dharma then progresses along the path. For example, when we look at a person, sometimes we say, oh, this person has a lot of merit. And what is merit? Merit is an altruistic mind. Whatever you do with body and speech that comes from a place of altruism becomes the cause of happiness. And some people do it consciously, and some people don't even notice that they're doing it. Some people are just naturally good people. They just naturally want to help others. And that is also because they have merit from previous lives. And merit is sustained if it becomes kind of sealed off with dedication. That's why we practice always these three parts in our practice, because in the end, if we do not dedicate, then it is possible that we will lose our merit. We speak about 4 different causes that destroy our roots of virtue. So that is why in the beginning, when we first start our practice, first, number 1, we cultivate the right motivation. We take refuge and we cultivate the right motivation. When we take refuge, we think about the qualities of the Buddha. And then we cultivate bodhicitta for the sake of all sentient beings. And then at the end, we have to dedicate. And if we dedicate, then that merit will remain for many future lifetimes, and we will continue to experience its results. And then, so that's a method for the Dharma to progress along the path. So again, even though your mind may have turned toward the Dharma also has to progress along, has to become the path. We have to progress along the path of Dharma.
Rang gita sunam kang sana senukiri da jibade etri yobe tel gita tajuk benetri dakso senji tam jeje zo da de ko yogo to de da de ki chibo song de de ma de wo yo ma de da de ko yo mo yo ri de we ne wang che ji dang da ngao nyam ba de cha de yo de etri so sor ta ba song de so sor to na zo de so sor ta ba so le ta mo ta ji de ta we ne ni de ren ni de chu ji ba de chu so wa so de lo so chu la de lo so de lo so mo de chu ni de ko re chu ni de ka me chu ni de me ne ka pin ba ma to ta to de wa de to ko yo ma ta to de wa de ta to dong yi ma le da de zo le yong zo ko san ji yi bi sem le chong so ne 내가 그동안에 뭐 체지들이 막 와송들이 랑집이 뭐 와송들이 대라고 장을 특바총을 삼체를 내비야 말이 돼 사바자 총총을 라래 뭐래 사바자 총총 가이게 차 나지 니지요네 나한테 조금은 직장이요 말이 소차 나지 소지들이 저기 그런 소리지 봐요 말이 저 소는 냄새요. 이게 천통을 때 맥도 이는 때리. 저 대도 소지 하장 첨보요. 대다리. 대회는 추추로 와서 나지 반데 요담에다나. 요래 요나한테 다리 타고 되는 차로는 매셔하는 저걸 녹아서 지미세면서 소나. 주시 받고 딱가리 독일자 단지리스 라리스 되면서 다 기반은 용부체도 돈은 다 매바라 다 정도 하고 다 매바라 다 무독스 가래 그러면 다또 친구는 차롱도데 도 말이지 차롱도 처리스 대답을 다 매바라 다 정도 그냥 대체 가디는 다 지고 로다면 어때 이비를 로지 쭉 돌아다니다 가디는 샘지 탐지지 샘지 탐지 상마다 샘지 탐지 상마다들이 내가 잡고요래 가래 샘지 차로는 이종들이 인피를 로데 너무 삼바세미 다트지 많이 정도 공하지 산속의 샘다 사족서 뭐 중족되는 거지 추추로는 추주가 다음에 봐도 거래 다음에 봐 더 다들까지 세미가 절대들이 연구를 다 사바세비 거를 나도 조금씩 보래 때들이 기타 사바사지 수남대야 그냥 기타지 뭐 잘라서 봐가지고 기타 뭔가 조바지와 들이 망가 로관가 때라서 봐 기타 때문에 절절되네 들이 기타 수남냠로를 기타 세부되는 옆에 남도 찍찍게 들이지 라고 수남을 저기 냠로를 대회를 들때 예비를 오고 그래 예비를 오다가 줄람도 좋아라 또 사바세미께라 줄람도 좋고요 그래 되게 용띠인 거래를 되고 다들 매나 생이 얘네 생이네 사제지 생이 얘네 사제지라면 얘는 배송 좀 받쳐 보라 생이데 동로 때는 나오는 바 가지고 내고 뭐지 생황을 벌 때는 도나고 되면 도가니 이 센터가 왕게 보는 거 두지 바나제들이 다 요말이 다 이메가 통했더니 람트바세 와서 티거리 대송로래 그래서 다 추추서 놀았더니 이피를 놓고 요는 너는 사바세미 깨거리 랑스는 좋아요 봐 랑그 니 니지 지아치와 린치와 대삼지 린치종 맨날 그 가든 치와 라말로 보면 그 주도 가든 레좀쟁이 시치와 이 가든 야랑 그 배도 밤에 집에 진지 진지를 새로 초과를 했고 요래 맨날 뭐저랑 밤에 집에 잘라지는 뒤잘라지 다지 에사치 보소리디 데르지나 오 밤에 진지들이 새로 초과를 다 뒤도 사발했고 요래 데려와더니 그 사바세미 되지는 그리고 내세디 작업도 봤잖아. 그 남지들이 그래서 차대를 사바세미 기나 들출라도 그러고요. 그래나 이제 인도도 좋아서 제지스 오게 제물라를 배송해. 세체 초대 바로나 탑시도 와로나면서 이마도 다요마고 가르치는들이 다진지스 베베시게 동담고 데바트는 소노들이 람트바스를 가려 뛰는 거고요. 다다들이 추추선 좋아라. 사촉선 세배가지. 제거래. 우리 좋아요 봐. 왜냐? 다들 잡을는데 나타동네 나오는 다다고 이제 파마마디 바치장 메스. 이제 마디 바치장 요 말이스. this 시제도 서울 체들이 랑그 체들 때도 파차고 요래. 자꾸 들어가면 독되는 이 사바체미 때는 람스 sem지 담지 이 제비지 공로 망보 송고요래. 이 등이 되는 람스 sem지 담지 람스 제도 봐. 그래. 그러나 그 요타비를 다 대로 공는 무슨 그때도 마디바 직tam에 아마르지와나 아마마지바 직tam에 이 양도 먼저 기체 보여요. 갑자기 초아르게 초아들이 랑마그 랑트난게들이 sem 초아 투주 요는 그러나 상반이 같은 지 같은 일이 sem 초아 되지 사발이고요. 때문에 호만로 섬지 섬지 대화서들이 가도 또 찍자요 말. 너는 자카디들 대나 자카드 가든지와 자카라고 자카지 가든지와 다 보초들이 다 거베나 로자 민강 다 자카고 추시 방저 자카지 받는 것만 망다 보자고요. 자카지 받자시 버리도 없이 등상문이 자카나 내요래. 얘는 자카티 가든지 버리도 없어나 자카들 자카들 맥을 내가 지고요. 내가 제못하게 가든지 버리지. 이 사마들이 로다 민강 사마 개기 가든지 버리 엠체 가든지 버리서 남스 셈 초아대 연거리 이 사바스비게 저들이 탐치 유디데 하고 유디데 지르들이 대 하고랑 셈 초아지디 유디들랑 거 토고요. 라고 세부 자공식을 때도 사바스비 장거리에서
So there, sorry. So there is a lot of for a lot of people, their mind has turned toward the Dharma, but then we still consider this life as most important. Whatever happiness and suffering we experience in this life. So in the beginning, this is how beginning practitioners practice. Now, when we begin to practice virtue, we do practice virtue, we do practice the Dharma, really with the self as most important. We do it because we want to be happy. That's why we practice virtue and accumulate merit. So first there is this self, and that's also natural. All sentient beings really consider themselves as most important, even a tiny little life form. There is no one who doesn't consider themselves as most important. It's very natural. So there's really, no one who doesn't do that. So first, that's how we start. We start really with ourselves, this sense of me. And so that's why we first enter the individual liberation pratimoksha path. That is really the path where we still have a very strong concept of me. And this is how we enter the Dharma. And then we turn away from that. So we enter the Dharma knowing that it is of great benefit. So the Dharma becomes, our mind turns toward the Dharma. But then to progress from that, the Dharma has to become the true Dharma. And so what is the true Dharma? So what often people do, they just leave it with themselves, and then what they end up doing is that they only bring about the temporary benefit, but not the ultimate happiness. Because their mind may have turned toward the Dharma, but the Dharma has not become the path. So in the 37 Bodhisattva practices, it says, all suffering without exception comes from wishing for one's own happiness. The perfect Buddhas arise from the altruistic mind. So people ordinarily only focus on this life, to not experience any suffering in this life, to be happy in this life. They only think about their own happiness. And that is what we call like someone following the lower vehicles. But saying lower vehicle also is not really like looking down on them or so. It is just that maybe their state of mind, their motivation is much smaller. Their scope is much smaller because they still perceive a duality of self and other. And therefore, the self is most important to them. And that is true for any being, also little animals. Even the smallest little creature in this world thinks about themselves. There is nothing that's more important to any living being than their own life force, themselves. So even a tiny little insect, a little creature, can look after their life force. They know how to do that because that's what's most important to them. And that is the self. We do that because of the self. And so then we should think, does this self exist or not? So for now, yes, there is. It does exist. It's like an ice block, and the ice block has to be melted through the altruistic mind. The perfect Buddhas arise from the altruistic mind. So what's the root of the Dharma? The only cause of suffering is self-grasping, the wish for one's own happiness, cherishing the self, believing in a self that doesn't actually exist. There is no self. It is just like temporarily there's this self which is like an ice block floating on the vast ocean. So there is such a self temporarily, like an ice block which seems to be like a rock. But ice is not rock. Ice is actually water by nature. So you are grasping at a self that does not really exist. And the only way to melt this ice block is the altruistic mind. And this is how your Dharma becomes the actual path. So when you cultivate an altruistic mind, you have to begin with immeasurable love. And immeasurable implies is all-pervasiveness. You have to pervade all sentient beings. And this is how the ice block of the mind melts. So this is how it is explained in the Bodhicharya Avatara, for example. You begin with those like your mother and so on who are close to you, and then you expand this love for all sentient beings. So you have to see whether or not your mind really pervades all sentient beings. And this is what determines whether or not your dharma becomes the true dharma. First, you have to recognize that self that doesn't really exist. And then recognize that it is eliminated, it is purified through cultivating immeasurable love. So think about the quality of that and think about the faults of not cultivating that. So as you have said before, that, for example, if we practice any virtue, a merit, then that can easily be destroyed. There's 4 causes that destroy our virtue. And that is, for example, when we feel arrogant, prideful about it, or when we regret it, or when we do not dedicate it, or when we make a corrupt dedication, and so on. So there are different things that make our merit decline. And that's also within our own mind. It's a single thought arising in your mind, a single thought that destroys all of your merit. And so that's why it is important to cultivate an altruistic mind. And this is how your dharma becomes the true dharma, becomes the path. So when you cultivate immeasurable love, your dharma progresses along the path. And then eventually, through love, you come to the ultimate truth. Because through love, that self-clinging disappears. And when there is no self, then, as it is said in the Dzogchen teachings, you realize that your own mind is primordially Buddha by nature. And whenever you see that, you see the ultimate reality. We also were introduced to that yesterday, for example, during the empowerment. There's this mind of selflessness, of non-duality, where self and other are indivisible. So whenever you see that, that is then the third dharma. That is where all confusion on the path is cleared away. So again, for your dharma to become the true dharma, that the only way for that is the altruistic mind. It is to cultivate immeasurable love. This is how your dharma becomes true dharma. And you cultivate immeasurable love by first beginning with those who are near you, those who are that you love very much, those who have been very kind to you, like, for example, your teacher. You remember the kindness of your teacher, your dharma teacher. It is because of the teachings that you have received, for example, that you understand and have gained certainty in karma. And then also remember the kindness of your parents, for example, how they have cared for you. And what's important when you remember this kindness is, when you feel gratitude, is that actual feeling arises within you. So and a feeling arises when you remember certain times, for example, when they gave you a very special gift, like a very precious object, and that you held so dear. Then you remember this kindness, and then a real feeling arises within you. And that's the real point, that the feeling has to arise. When a feeling arises, that's when the ice block is really melting. And that is when your dharma becomes the path. Milarepa also had said, aside from practicing merit, virtue in whatever you do, there is no other perfection of skillful means than that. So then whatever you do becomes dharma practice. And then ultimately, through immeasurable love, you see the ultimate truth. You see, you realize non-dual primordial wisdom, the non-duality of self and other, and that is when all confusion on the path is cleared away. So again, for the dharma to become true dharma, cultivate immeasurable love, and so that a real feeling arises. And so now, for example, we can look in this world, there's a lot of suffering, people are sick and suffer a lot. So bring all of that to mind and pervade all sentient beings with immeasurable love. And then you begin with those near you, for example, your parents or friends, those who your loved ones, and then think that there's no being who has not been that. And this is how your mind pervades sentient beings. So you have to see for yourself, is my mind really pervading all sentient beings or not? And this is what determines whether or not your mind or your dharma becomes the path. So we speak much about the four immeasurables, especially immeasurable love. But it has to be habituated as a feeling, so that when you think of sentient beings, then instantly you pervade them with love immediately. So it becomes very natural. And you start first with those who are near you, those who you love very much. For example, if you love your mother very much, then think that there is not a single being who has not been my mother, and so on. And then you practice that over and over again with everyone else. So habituation here is extremely important, and also to develop an actual feeling, to really experience it. So this is then how your dharma becomes the path. So you think of the kindness, you remember the kindness each and every time somebody's kind, you remember their kindness with gratitude, and in this way love arises in your mind. So in this way you're accumulating love, just like a honeybee is accumulating honey. And so then you recognize that, this is really, this is the cause of all happiness. This is the cause of happiness for all sentient beings. Then you expand that. So you start with those who are near you, and then you expand your thought of gratitude. For example, when you look in your country, you think about the kindness of your country. For example, the schools and the hospitals and the finances and so on, everything that is provided by the country, how the country protects its people and so on. So you always should have this feeling of the country is so precious, and the people working for the country are so kind. So you think in this way, remembering others with gratitude. For example, when you meet with a school teacher and you think that that's so precious, or if it's a doctor in a hospital, then you think that is so precious. So you remember that kindness, and so a real feeling arises. And so this is how we develop immeasurable love. So to develop immeasurable love, it's important to understand the quality, the purpose of it. And then, then a real feeling will arise. And if that feeling arises, then that quality also that you have rejoiced in, will also arise within yourself. And the ice block of your mind is melting. So mainly we have to train in immeasurable love.
주로 로마 점다 탐색들이 따뜻해도 나 대따오들이 탐하게들이 랑게 년자지 저삼제 되지나 그래도 파삼제들 맞지라 쳐다시메케야들이 파자보지를 저삼보지가 요래 나 앞에 다치게서는 랑가나 대체그 유명한지 랑게 삭바데 파만이 하적가는 진보를 그 파데 वर्षबागे लोचुसम गुतने सेकंडे लोग मोटे ये काटिंग से बोले लवाने जिले मायने तेरी मांगे मिचे काम वो टोंबा देखे तेरी आमा कंट्रोल लांग 통만용 데이터 버리 데이터 파마트 진이나 लवाने जिते पा सेवा 요지 델라 तीनी 진다 포마 서대 서이나 ये 탐지 기지나 년나지가 집제지 다들 가래는 다 보자 대탐지를 탐지를 잡아주면 깨도 띠디 냠용 냠용이다 파마 얘기 자캅 대선을 드리고 싹바들 얘기 파마 파메르지 얘기 가르치 뭐 얘기는 취지 얘기는 이제 얘기가 찍어야들이 가래는 맞을 내 가래나 축을 내용은 축 얘기 직집을 내용은 직집에 얘기 탐지 랑게들이 오 말로다 얘기들 배 쌈디면 잡아 통고도 랑성 대바도 대도 세미 제톱고래 대 용띠 지고서 대 독기 빠트는 뭐지 좀 매주 조지 냠데 되네 조지 좀 때는 당셈 저거래 내려지면 뒤가 차오래 들이라고 당셈 때 땅이 성자와 시당이 쏘라 봐도 조바 거만하게送我래 당셈 쫑주고서 자를 마도스 사자 빌다가送我래 이지 좀 마도스 라고 용은 뒤바다 제왕이 봐 처사진이 봐 이제 장본 처지 제왕이 주기 봐 이제 쫑자자 저 최단지 띵가가 손에들이 돌리라마 타와에나다 셀 주도 빈소는 저랑 양문에 쫑자자 데 저들 되게 라니를 때 쫑을 소리 제당 당세를 제거래 나한테는 저랑 당세 양편에 랑 수장 통사매 받대 차로래 이 자는 맞이지 사제게 송이 쫑을 찍다 매 삼은 모나는 송이 샘제 정말 디바라 사제는 몸을 제서 이 샘기 인이 저게 생은 유모바 요리 샘제 생긴 뭐였나 요새 요리 요새 청청을 해서 좀 파역 요는 맞이 용딘지고 용딘지를 들라게 용딘을 들이 현고만 대받지 그래 세우만 사받지 그래 들이다 랑글로마 이치 담게 네 가리고 다시 사받세미 공지 미만 볼때 잡고 사받세미 공지 랍송 사받세미 뒤지나 다요 말이야 랑이 그들 이피로 차나 속 차시나 속 차도 지나서나 삼바통이 근데 예동과 게임이 뭐 속지 뭐 대답이 삼바가 용띠리 대답을送了들이 출람들로 와라도 삼바sem이 개가 탑라 다 대답이 랑이 냠냠 따르지 저게 저러나 말아 그렇지 삼바sem이 개들이 미티 출람으로 저 가요 말 세체 소저 팔아서 그러다 네 또반지 뜻을 무송하래 생은 깨는 깨세 소남 초 마치 김이 이시체 있으면 송도 조송 누가 송구만은 송 생을 대했다면 이시 소들 삼바다 능지 시랍다 능지 이 코나지도 송 얘네들이 살롱아 있어라들 이렇게 세세 탑이 송롱아 송구만 송으래 나한테 들을 주는 거요 말에 내가 셔찰 애들이 보고 족발 셔찰에 족발지 대선 걸롱아에서 그마 차고 빠진다 속에서 말에 대 저리야로 타마게 때 랍당나 이리들 출람들 만로란로리 세세들이 말아리 배송하는 게 도요래디 차고 빠진다 속에 차고 빠진다 속에 링아에서 그마 대해서 링마 보파서 가는 거 내용 세차례 고소나 차우 아저도 없고
So what I'm sharing is really my own experience, and how I have cultivated immeasurable love. And so how I have actually cultivated immeasurable love is by remembering the kindness and the love of others. So mainly starting with my parents, and then, for example, my Dharma friends and all the disciples and the benefactors and so on. Like I think of how they love me, and then naturally I love them, because how can I not love them if they give me so much love? It's just natural. For example, if you have a cat or a dog, then like if you love them, then naturally they will also love you. This is really how it naturally happens. That's why there's this natural mutual bond of love. So especially when I cultivate immeasurable love, I think about the kindness. I remember the kindness of my parents. For example, my father, he actually had pointed out the nature of my mind when I was 13 years old. And he really, I see him really as like my Lama. He's been extremely kind. And also my mother, I see her as a Lama, because her entire life, no one has ever, even in town, no one has ever seen her getting angry at all. It was quite incredible. And therefore she also is like a lama. Both my parents, I see them as my lamas, my teachers. And I always remember them with great love. And in a similar way, I think about anyone else, like who has been somebody who has been very kind to me, like a sponsor, for example, whoever, a disciple, Dharma friend, whoever loves me, I think of them with love too, and so I naturally want to care for them. So this is how you should cultivate immeasurable love. So again, just speaking from my own personal experience. So in brief, to cultivate immeasurable love, we think of the kindness of our parents, of teachers, our teachers, and of our country, especially of the teachers. So your parents gave you a body, a precious human body, and the teachers have taught you everything in this world and also in the Dharma. So if you have the karma to have a Dharma teacher, then you will find such a teacher. And if you have the karma in the mundane world, then you will find a worldly teacher. For example, even if it's a worldly teacher, for example, when I meet with a school teacher, immediately I feel that they are so kind, they are really incredible. And really faith in them, devotion in them arises within me. So this is how it has to kind of become. And in order for that to happen, Drikung Rinpoche had said, therefore you should never look at the faults of others, of your companions. Because when you look at the faults, then anger and resentment against them arises, and then you will lose your harmony with them. Milarepa also had said, the root of the lower realms is hatred. Therefore, practice patience, even at the cost of your life. So do not look at the faults of others. Also, Sakya Pandita had said that. Do not look at the faults of others, and do not look at your own good qualities. And so, in this way, that this is how a wise person acts. Otherwise, if we don't see it that way, if we pick at the small flaws of others, then we will only see faults. And then when people kind of are conditioned to only see faults, then they will pick on anything. Then they will look at a lama or a monk or at their Dharma friends or their family members, and all they can see is just faults. Wherever they look, they just see faults. And then every time they see a fault, anger arises and a resentment arises in their mind. And in this way, the negativity, the anger in their mind increases more and more. So at some point, they can't even look at anyone anymore because all they can see is faults. So therefore, do not fixate on faults. Just let them go, because the Buddha also said that there is no one who doesn't have faults. There's no one who is perfect like that. So everyone has it. And also in the Maitreya prayer, it says, so it is for this reason that Buddhas do not blame sentient beings for their afflictions, because they all have them. Even though beings possess Buddha nature, all beings possess afflictive emotions too. But compared to the quality of Buddha nature, those faults are very small. So you can just let them go and don't grasp at them, don't think about them, but rather think about their good qualities. So then when you think about the qualities of others, then, for example, the higher beings, then devotion for them arises. And when you think about the qualities of the sentient beings, then love for them arises. And so all those disciples who trust me, I always advise them, this is how you should practice. So meditate just on that, practice just that, meaning immeasurable love. Cultivate immeasurable love. And when immeasurable love arises, then there is no self in your mind. Then then, for example, even it manifests in the animal realm. There are certain animals that have more love than others, and then those animals who possess more love, then they are more beautiful, and they have a beautiful voice, and they can coexist. We invite them in, we feed them, and so on. So think about the quality of love in all kinds of different ways. And this is how your dharma becomes the path. So the skillful means the method, the practice is to cultivate love. And so again, Dharma friends, I'm really just speaking from my own personal experience on how I have cultivated immeasurable love. So if any person cultivates immeasurable love, then they really can't help but progress on the Dharma. It just happens naturally. As we said before, then whatever you do, anything becomes a practice of virtue. Anything becomes an accumulation of merit. Also, Jigten Sumgön had said, the Rinpoche, that I gave these teachings to the Tibetan community in New York at some point, which was a song by Jigten Sumgön, like kind of an encouragement to practice with body, speech, and mind. A song that was sang at Saok. There's this place name. Anyways, this has been printed too, and it's the songs by Jigten Sumgön. And so it speaks about that when when immeasurable love arises within the mind, then merit just can't help but arise, naturally arises. And when it arises, then naturally you dissolve into the non-dual state, realizing selflessness. So when love and compassion arises in brief, wisdom naturally arises too. So this is just now a brief explanation, since we also don't have so much time. But basically, in brief, if immeasurable love arises, then your Dharma path will just naturally become the true Dharma. You can't help but for it to become the Dharma. Please take a rest for 30 minutes.